I had signed with professional baseball, and now I come back to college, and I'm still a college student, but I got money in my pocket finally. The days of having to share our per diem of $10, and we had to pool our money together to get pizza. Like those days were over. All the fellas, like everything's on Danan, and everything was cool, and we had a good time. So that fall of 1992 was like a special time.
Welcome to the Gallery at Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
This episode, we are excited to have former All-Big Ten Iowa and NFL wide receiver Danan Hughes on the show. He's fourth all-time for Iowa in receiving from Bayonne, New Jersey, and one of the original two-sport athletes. Welcome to the show.
What's going on, fellas? Good to be here, man. Good to be in Hawkeye world and amongst my Hawkeye brothers. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Let's first talk about the recruiting process. You excelled at football and baseball at the same time, so talk about that if you will.
Yeah, man. Being a North Jersey kid, I had a little bit of common sense, not a whole lot. I realized that staying near home wasn't necessarily going to make for a successful life for me. I felt like I needed to get away, to get on my own. The furthest schools away that recruited me was Nebraska and Iowa. All the East Coast schools, Syracuse, Maryland, Rutgers, Boston College, Penn State recruited me, but I just felt like I wanted to get away. My first visit, the first time I ever got on a plane, the first time I was basically out of the tri-state area was my flight to Iowa and flying in to Cedar Rapids. And I remember it like it was yesterday, landing in the middle of the cornfields. Where am I at? What am I doing here? All these cornfields, where are all the buildings, and what's going on? It was definitely a blessing. The best decision of my life was to visit Iowa. I was sold once I got there. I remember Bernie Wyatt coming into my living room and to my high school basketball games, telling me about Iowa. I wasn't sold until I got there. Coach Fry came in after that and wowed me with his Texas twang and cowboy boots. I had never seen cowboy boots in my life. He walked up into my living room and convinced me that he was going to allow me to play baseball and football. As you mentioned, I played two sports at Iowa, and that was really the deal maker for me. Any school that I was going to contemplate going to was going to allow me to play baseball and football. Baseball is my first love. It still is. And it was very important to me that I had an opportunity to play both sports.
Were you getting looked at from schools just for baseball as well?
Yeah, there were several schools in Florida area that wanted me to play baseball. My high school coaches did a good job of sorting through those schools. They might have been smaller Division I schools in baseball. He made it known that I was a two-sport athlete and that I would have opportunities to play both sports. So it weeded out several of those smaller schools. As you guys know, baseball, the non-revenue sports, only allow for a certain amount of scholarship. At that time, it was 11.7 scholarships that were available for the entire team. People maybe don't realize that a lot of baseball players don't go to school on full scholarships. They either have some hybrid of academic and athletic, or they have to pay out of their pocket. For me, that wasn't going to be an option. I was fortunate I had the football package to go along with the baseball. That's where the big schools were able to rise to the top and show that they were interested in me.
And so at that time, were you also contemplating going right into the majors for baseball? Was that an option for you?
No, I don't think it was. I was from an inner city school. We had a lot of good athletes. I consider myself like a diamond in the rough. I wasn't really polished. I was just a good athlete that happened to play baseball, football, and basketball. I knew, and I'm sure the scouts knew, that I needed cultivating. I needed to be in a program. Remember, when you're playing baseball, basketball, and football, you're never playing one sport all year long. You're just dividing your time amongst each sport. In high school, from the end of the summer until after Thanksgiving, it was only football. After Thanksgiving until March, it was only basketball. Because basketball was done, it was baseball through the spring and through the summer. I only played like 3 months of baseball every year. We didn't have summer travel baseball. I was one of those guys that you could tell there was potential. You just didn't know how it would play itself out. I played shortstop, I pitched, I wound up playing the outfield later in high school. I'm sure that the scouts saw something, but they just didn't know how it was going to cultivate, how it was going to show itself. I was fortunate to get into a program like the University of Iowa and head coach Dwayne Banks. Even though I was only doing part time with them because I was playing football, I got to know and learn the game of baseball in a deeper way and understand how to approach the game, how to play against top shelf opponents every single week. Big Ten baseball back then was prime baseball. It wasn't any slouches there. You're talking about big time first round picks that were coming from all across the landscape of the Big Ten at Michigan, Ohio State, at Iowa. Minnesota was a huge powerhouse back then as well. So we got to play a lot of quality baseball, and that helped me develop into a baseball player who happened to be an athlete. I share that a lot when I speak with kids. There's a difference between being a football player who's an athlete and an athlete trying to be a football player, or a baseball player who's an athlete versus the opposite. Once I got to college, I was just an athlete who could play baseball. Once I understood all the nuances and details of being a baseball player and how to hit, how to field, how to approach the ball, it made me a more complete player, which ultimately opened the door for me to be a draft pick with the Milwaukee Brewers my junior year. I had to always be eligible. I had to always stay on top of my grades because I was playing football during the fall, then I was playing baseball during the spring, and then I was playing summer baseball somewhere. I went to West Virginia and played in different summer leagues, wood bat leagues, and so on. I always had to stay on top of my game academically and athletically in order to be able to play all three sports. There's some guys that slack off a little bit during the spring football because they're going to take summer classes. They'll be eligible for the fall and they rinse and repeat every year. I didn't have that luxury. I had to stay on top of everything in order to be able to put my best foot forward in football, which was paying for me to be on scholarship. Baseball had the luxury of basically having free money because football was playing my scholarship. I was on the baseball team basically as a walk-on.
Did you consider basketball at all? Were you good enough to get recruited for basketball too?
Yeah, I was, but it was small college basketball up in mostly the Northeast. That was really not an option for me. There were a lot of dominant basketball players I had played against in high school. Bobby Hurley, Danny Hurley, St. Anthony's that was number one in the nation. We had a lot of really good basketball players. It was a hotbed for basketball. Even though I played against them and with those guys, I knew that necessarily that was probably the third in regards to an opportunity to play at the college level. It was really about baseball. Football kind of came about on its own. Like I wasn't even the best football player on my high school team. I was just a really good athlete that happened to play football, and coaches noticed I was 6'2", 190 pounds, playing playing quarterback, playing free safety, playing linebacker. When I was recruited by Iowa and all the other schools, they were like, "You pick what position you want." I feel like I'm maybe a little bit short for quarterback. So I'll just try this wide receiver thing. I feel like I'm an athlete. I'll try wide receiver. Never played wide receiver in my life until I stepped on the campus at the University of Iowa. I don't think that could happen nowadays, but for me, I give a lot of credit to Bernie Wyatt because he saw something in me that I didn't even know was in me. Coach Fry was able to latch on to that. Coach Snyder, Bill Snyder was my offensive coordinator. They saw potential that I don't even think I even knew about. I was just playing football because there was no fall baseball. I didn't have any baseball options. My buddies were playing football, so I was like, all right, I'll just go ahead and play football. And We were a really good high school football team. We had a lot of good athletes, and we were able to flourish. That opened the door for the attention that I got from a recruiting standpoint.
Did Bernie just stumble upon you when he was out recruiting other guys in your team, or how did that kind of open up for you?
I believe that's the truth. We had an all-state linebacker who was my cousin. He was my running back, and he was a linebacker. He was all-state in both positions. He wound up going and playing at Nebraska as a strong safety. Nebraska recruited both of us to play free safety and strong safety. I didn't want to play defense. People may not remember back in the 80s and 90s, Nebraska Cornhuskers, their receivers were still in three-point stances. They were running the wishbone. So the receivers weren't catching any balls. They were just basically glorified blockers down the field. So I don't know if I want to go out there and just block. I don't want to play defense. Iowa was one of the more prominent between Iowa and BYU. We were the more prominent passing pro style offenses when you talk about Chuck Long and Chuck Hartley. So that was a draw for me. They were recruiting at my cousin, and they just happened to see me on the film. And like I said, I wasn't a superstar. I feel like I was an athlete. I had 11 interceptions my senior year as a free safety. I was a quarterback. We ran the ball a lot. I probably only threw the ball 3, 4, 5 times a game. There wasn't really a whole bunch to be able to say from a number standpoint, oh, this guy can come in and make an impact. I think it was more about the potential. That was one of the great gifts that Bernie Wyatt had in recruiting. When you think about his tree and his legacy of recruiting the Ronnie Harmons, Andre Tippett's, Devon Mitchell, Tony Stewart, B. Ferroni, Mike Devlin, he knew what guys had on the East Coast. Mike Titley. I could go on and on about guys that we played with, Larry Blue, Harold Jasper, all those guys, Bo Porter. There was something about recognizing the athletes that had a lot of potential, and I think that's what he saw in me.
I was going to ask about your knowledge of Iowa before you got recruited, because Penn State wasn't in the Big Ten yet, Rutgers wasn't in the Big Ten yet. So had you heard about the Hawks or Hayden or anything before that?
There were a couple of people from my hometown, actually cousins of mine that went out to Iowa, Dwayne Williams, Jerome Rowe, that were running backs that went out there. To be honest, I didn't know much about the school. I didn't know much about the program. I just knew that they went out there. I wasn't really a football fan. I didn't watch football. I just played it because I couldn't play baseball during that time. So when Iowa came to recruit me, my parents were actually against me going out to Iowa because those two family members went out there, and although they got good education, they were far away from home. They didn't have an opportunity to go to the pros, or there wasn't any big positivity around University of Iowa in my hometown. It wasn't anything bad, but it just wasn't anything really good. So when I opted to go on a visit, I went alone. My parents didn't even go on a visit with me. It was the first time I was ever on a plane. I went out to Iowa, and then I come back raving about the University of Iowa. They're looking at me like, this is not supposed to be an option for you. We just kind of let you go because you wanted to go. But Boston College, Rutgers, and Penn State are recruiting you. Like, let's tighten it up and bring it back home a little bit. And I was like, no, man, this University of Iowa thing that's where I'm supposed to be. And what's interesting about my recruiting visit is, and I always tell this story, which is weird, but the Iowa wrestling program was actually the reason why I went to Iowa. And that's a weird story because I came on my visit, landed in the middle of the cornfields of Cedar Rapids. We get in the van with a bunch of other recruits, and they're saying, hey, we're going to go to a wrestling match. And I grew up in Jersey. I'm like, wrestling? What are you talking about? Hulk Hogan, like WWF? What are you talking about wrestling? And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to wrestling. So we pull up the Carver Hawkeye Arena. Back then, the recruits got the seats right around the mat side, court side. We're walking down, and it's standing room only. 16,000 something people in there, standing room only. And it comes down to the heavyweight match. Our Hawkeyes have to pin the guy in order for the Hawkeyes to win. We get the pin, the place erupts. It goes nuts. And I remember looking over to the other recruit that was next to me. I was like, if they go crazy for wrestling like this, I can't imagine what they do for football. I was sold right then. It wound up being #1 Iowa versus #2 Iowa State. I had no idea about the rivalry. I had no idea about the popularity of wrestling. I was just green walking in there, just a runny nosed kid. And I'm looking around like at this basketball arena that's filled with people, standing room only, screaming for wrestling. They could have took me back to the airport right after the match. Like I didn't have to see anything else at the school. I was like, I'm signing on the dotted line. I'm going to this school because this energy here is real. I never looked back. I went to visit Boston College a week later because my parents forced me. We're not even endorsing or supporting you going to Iowa. You at least got to go somewhere else and visit. So the next visit I had was Boston College, and I didn't like it at all. I didn't like Boston. We went to the Boston Garden. We watched the Celtics play. It was cool, but I had already been swayed to Iowa. I was already ready to jump on I-80 and get to Iowa as quickly as possible. It was the best decision of my life. It was a great experience. I still go on vacation with 20 of my Hawkeye teammates. We go on vacations every year. They've been to my kids' weddings. I've been to their kids' weddings. We're in fantasy football leagues together. We travel together. Our wives are part of ladies groups where they go on girls trips together. I would have never thought that my experience and my time at the University of Iowa would have spanned decades beyond me wearing the black and gold. That's really how it's been. My parents have come around, obviously. they recognize how special of a place it was. Like, I would have never guessed that a college experience for 5 years would have amounted to 30 plus years later of having relationships and friendships like I do. It's truly a brotherhood.
There's got to be something in the water in New Jersey too, because there's at least 6 or 7 guys in that time frame that are from that area.
Yes.
Back to the wrestling matches, I used to go to those as a kid. The thing that amazed me the most was matches were 6 minutes, right? Which, like in wrestling terms, I think is an eternity. These guys would get done with the match, they would run up and down the steps a couple times, or they'd have someone on their back and they would do that. And I can also remember once they would get to the edge of the mat, they would shove the opponent out of the ring and sprint back to the middle. Just the mental energy and the intensity of Gable was impressive. Yeah, even as a little kid, I can fully remember that.
Oh, there's no more impressive position or person than a Hawkeye wrestler. And I remember playing baseball in the spring and watching those guys carrying each other across the campus, running around Carver Hawkeye and around the baseball complex. I was in orientation with the Brands brothers, Terry and Tom Brands. Like we came into the university together, and watching how those guys developed and just the work ethic, like it was freakish to me. I'm a city kid. I'm an inner city kid. There's not much that phases me. If I saw a few wrestlers walking down the street, I might cross the other side because I'm like those guys are a different breed. I know that they're wired a little bit differently. I'm not messing with them. If we saw them downtown, I'm like, cool, man. You guys have fun. Enjoy your night. I'm going to another bar because I don't even want to mess with those guys. They're definitely a different breed, but it was special to see, especially for a guy like, unlike you, Nick. I'd never seen anybody like that. I'd never seen anything like that. To see people my age with that kind of work ethic, with that kind of mindset, with the light switch mentality. You got to be able to have that on the football field. But those guys, that's a different level. Like you said, 6 minutes, they got to be like animals. That light switch mentality is real on the wrestling mat. It's one of those things that I think made me successful on the football field too. I was able to adapt and adopt a lot of that mindset from those guys, seeing how they worked, seeing their attention to detail, seeing their commitment to making weight and being the best possible. That's something that permeates through an entire school. It's not just about the wrestling. You can see it on the basketball levels. Back then, you could see it with the football team. You could see it with the baseball team. There's an identity about the entire program, the entire university, that I think starts with the wrestling program.
I was second grade, because I grew up in Iowa City. I went to the Dan Gable wrestling camp in the summer, And I was like, I think I'm good. I think I like football, basketball.
Yeah.
This wrestling thing is a little different kind of sport. It's not really my liking, but it's cool
There's
to
something,
say, go through the experience and not even realize at the time who was running the camp. It was just like some guy.
there's something to be said about maturity and knowing what you want to do and knowing what you don't want to do. I think we can all attest. We might not have known what we really wanted to do, but we knew we didn't want to do that wrestling thing. That was a different animal for those guys. Those special creatures that don the mask.
Definite respect. Yeah, it was.
Yes,
You guys
sir.
are incredible. Yeah, but not for me.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of special creatures, the rarity to be able to maybe go to college in 3 different sports, there's many pieces to this that I think I'm just trying to get my head around. To be able to play 2 sports in college and then play in the summer, the mental part, the physical part, the drive, the maturity, where did all that come from? How did you work through all that? For me, going in just focusing on one thing in school was a lot. To add these multiple layers, you had to be mature enough to say, listen, I'm only going to do this if this happens. It's a really unique situation that you were able to do that physically and mentally and all that. So if you could talk to that, I'd love to hear about that.
I had a little bit of common sense, not a whole lot of common sense. I was a 17-year-old freshman. I graduated high school at 17 and redshirted my first year at Iowa. So I was pretty young, naive. I knew that I loved the game of baseball and I knew I wanted to play both. That was one thing that was stuck in my mind. It was embedded in my mind that baseball had to be on the table. Now, as far as football is concerned and juggling both, a lot of people always say, man, that must have been super hard. That must have been a grind. And to be honest, it wasn't. And I'm not saying that from a pompous standpoint or bragging. It's something that I had done my entire life. Like from the age of 6 years old, I was playing baseball and basketball. I didn't start playing football until I was like 12. So I had played multiple sports all my life. That's all I knew is go from one season to the next. So when I got to college, it was normal. I had already been able to juggle the academics in high school and playing all 3 sports. So when I got to college, I was like, okay, this is normal. Had I not played baseball, I probably would have had a lot of challenges and struggles academically and athletically. I feel like I would have had too much free time on my hands. By knowing August 1st, that's when I had to report for football. You had to do the shuttle back then. Then you had to go through 2-a-days. Once January 1st came, if you didn't go to a bowl game, I was clearing out my football locker. I was moving all my stuff over to the baseball side of the complex. It was baseball focused January through June. Once June hit, I started preparing for football. It was like a cycle every single year. And one of the components of Coach Fry and his commitment to me is that he said, Danan, if as long as you are playing baseball, not sitting the bench, not redshirting, you don't have to play spring football. I didn't even have to play spring football for 3 of my 4 years. I had to play both my freshman year because I redshirted in football and I redshirted in baseball. But after that, I started every game of my career at wide receiver except for one. That was against Michigan State my sophomore year, and I went in on the second play. Basically started every game of my career as a Hawkeye football player. So I only played 1 year of spring football. Every year I was away from the football team and I was just totally committed to baseball during the spring. That's probably not something that would happen nowadays. They make guys at least participate a little bit, but that's a testament to Coach Fry. The one thing I really always appreciated about Coach Fry, when he came into my living room, what he said, he delivered on. What he asked of me, I delivered on. He said, Danan, if you keep your academics straight and you're playing baseball, you don't have to come to the football side. You don't have to come to a meeting, an off-season workout. You don't have to do anything. A lot of the recruiting is sales. They're trying to sell you on the school. They'll tell you whatever they think you want to hear so you can sign with the school. Whether they welch on it or not, they don't care because they already got you signed. Trust me when I tell you there is nobody that I am more fond of, that I'm more appreciative and more respectful of than Coach Fry. It mattered to me and it mattered to my parents as well. When you tell me something, you deliver on it. That's exactly what he did. Forever, I'll always respect him and love him just for that alone, regardless of how my career would have unfolded. The fact that he stood on his word, he meant what he said what he meant, really sunk into me deeply for the rest of my life. It's one of the things that I consider him a mentor, if for no other reason, for being a person of his word. And Coach Banks on the baseball side, basically delivering on his side. They didn't have to. I wasn't an Iowa kid. They didn't have to look at my high school coaches every year, run the risk of not recruiting somebody later. They just delivered based on integrity. I will always feel there will always be a special place in my heart for the Iowa programs, baseball and football, because of that.
I was there in 92. Nick came a year later, but were you coming off of minor leagues that summer of
Yes.
92? And then,
Yes.
okay, because I remember some like talk like Dana's playing baseball right now, and then he'll be here for camp.
That was the most special time in the world. Nick, you were a year behind it, but we got to know each other later. But I had money. Think about our lives at Slater Hall and training table and all the different things, and going down and dime beers and quarter draws and all that stuff, and shooting hoops at the sports column to win a beer here and there. And now I got money. Like, I'm bringing all the fellas in, Jazz, Lloyd, Larry, everybody is Cliff. Everybody is coming along with me. It's a party. I got a brand new red Jeep. I got money in my pocket, got an own apartment. I signed for 6 figures, and I'm a college student. And I signed with the Milwaukee Brewers. That was a 92 draft. So I was drafted with Derek Jeter, Jason Giambi. We were all day one drafts, and I got a nice 6-figure bonus. And the only stipulation I had with the Brewers was I have to go back to my senior year of football. I'll sign with you and I'll play this summer. We'll see how the future unfolds after that, but I'll sign now. But I have to go back for my senior year of football. So when I went back for my senior year of football, that whole fall, like, it was a party. When I tell you, I had my Jeep, I had personalized plates. So everybody knew my Jeep around campus. The cops didn't mess with us. We would go to Country Kitchen, and we would have feasts on Sunday mornings after the games. Like, I would bring 10, 15 guys over. They would all jam themselves into my Jeep, have breakfast after shakeout run, and Saturday nights after games. It was a great experience. It was fun to be a part of, but that was a benefit. I had signed with professional baseball, and now I come back to college, and I'm still a college student, but I got money in my pocket finally. The days of having to share our per diem of $10. Remember those days we got $10 per diem, and we had to pool our money together to get pizza. Like, those days were over. All the fellas, like, everything's on Danan, and everything was cool, and we had a good time. So that fall of 1992 was like a special time. You can ask any of those fellas, like even the freshmen, like Cedric Shaw and Demo, and like all the cats that were freshmen, they were joining in too. We didn't haze those guys. It was like, whoever's free, whoever wants to come, let's go. And we're going to have some food. We're going to have some beers. We're going to have some drinks. We're going to have some fun. And it was just a blast. It was a perfect kind of cap on an amazing career at Iowa, not just from a number standpoint and football standpoint, but just an experience. A University of Iowa Hawkeye experience with the brothers. It was an amazing experience. And remember, like you had mentioned with Bernie Wyatt, when he went and got guys from New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, we had. We didn't have family members coming out for every game. We didn't have the ability to drive home for Christmas break or spring break. We had all we had. So we would get together and, man, I got $5. You got $2. You got $3. Let's get some pizza. Let's go down to Burger King. Let's try to figure this out. Like, we had to live with each other. We became literally a family because that's all we had. And then one of our family members hit it big. He hit the lottery. So now everybody's like coming in and, okay, we're gonna have a good time. So yeah, it was a blast, and we still talk about those times to this day. And I get together with Matt Rogers, Jimmy Hartley, Paul Kujawa, Al Cross, Mike Saunders, John Derby, Mike Devlin, Chris Green. We all get together at least once a year for a vacation. We got Cliff King, Howard Jasper, Mike Titley, Larry Blue,
Hello,
Lloyd
Tim.
Bickham. Yeah, man, it's amazing, bro. As you get older, you start to value things that maybe other people don't pay attention to or don't think highly of. But you're like, wow, I got to Iowa in 1988, and like you're talking about 36 years later, this is what we have. We got guys that it's just amazing to think of the brotherhood and the connections and the long lasting relationships that we've had with multiple guys. It's not just about one or two guys. We're talking about like 20, 25 guys that we're on group texts. We're on trips together. We're freaking going to weddings and kids are getting married and kids are graduating from college and we're part of all of that together and it's normal. It's not like it's some huge ordeal. It's a text message away, like, oh yeah, I'll be out in Portland next week. I'm coming out for the wedding. Oh, Cliff's coming out for my son's wedding. Mike Titley and I talk almost every single day. We got a group text with Matt Rogers and those guys. I would have never guessed that the college experience would have equated to all of this. Yeah, we have great memories and we see the flashbacks on Twitter about on this day back in 1990, on this day in 91, when we beat teams and we beat Ohio State at Ohio State and we beat Michigan at Michigan and we went to the Rose Bowl. And you see all those different things and those are great. And obviously you're proud about those moments, but I'm 100 times more proud that I got an invitation just today for Paul Kujawa's wedding. I got an invitation earlier this year for Mike Saunders' daughter's wedding that we're connecting together on a constant basis. Like that's what the college experience is about. And I got 5 kids of my own. 4 of them played college sports. And I remember telling them, if you come out of college and the only thing you have to show for it is your stats and the actual sport, like you're missing the boat. And my kids have been in 4, 5, 6 of their teammates' weddings and bridal showers, and they've been in my kids' weddings. That's what the college experience is about. And I would have never known that. I don't think I would have ever experienced it to the level that I did had I not gone to Iowa.
I think this thing too has reminded me, like we've talked to like probably 10 or 11 guys so far, and just the quality of people that we were around. I realized at the time, but I didn't really realize it till now that I was like, we really had some quality teammates and guys that played now compared to guys that played back then or whatever. It was all cut from the same cloth, same people. So it's one of the amazing things about the program that I think we really wanted to try to highlight when we started to do this.
Yeah, I think I've caught a few of you guys' podcasts, and I think you guys are knocking it out the park, man. I think it's great that you guys are connecting the old generation, the former generation with the new. You're able to bring it all together, not just from, hey, you remember this game you had in 1990 or whatever else, but it's just about the personal side and connecting us all having that same connection. Like I said, seeing Brion out in Portland and being able to hit it off right away. It wasn't like we were just meeting for the first time. It was like Hawkeye brothers. And then Nick, obviously, when you came to Kansas City, we're all together, man, and your brother as well. That's what it was about. Like, and I know our window of time is very unique because I've talked to guys from previous years, from the Chuck Longs and the Chuck Hartleys and the Mark Blasicks and the Devin Harberts and those guys. And they're like, I don't know what was in the water with you guys, but you guys have a different bond with each other than any of those other previous generations had. Yeah, there's 3 or 4 guys that stay connected, but we're talking about tens and 20s of guys that are still connected like a brotherhood. Kids are calling us Uncle Danan and Uncle Cliff and Uncle Jazz. Those are the relationships that are super, super special that I would have never guessed that a football or a college experience would have equated to something like that. It's real. It's so real. So I give a lot of credit to like my post football life, my post college life, and a lot of the joys that I've experienced with going all the way back to the roots in Iowa City.
I'm almost thinking that 92 year is like the first NIL because that's what it's like now for guys like, hey, I got money. What do I do with this? That was way back when, original.
Who knew I was the first NIL?
You were.
They need to pay me some royalties. I got to
That's
call
right.
Cliff and Lloyd and all them.
Sounds like, yeah, they owe you a lot of money.
That's great. Back to the sports side of things. How long did it take you coming in as a receiver and not really playing much receiver? How long did it take you to feel comfortable in that role? And also baseball, if you want to talk about that transition from, high school to college, did that take a while or was that, pretty quickly or?
I know that's not popular now for a lot of kids coming out of high school to sit and watch and redshirt and absorb, but I can't equate the amount of knowledge and understanding of the game of football, the game of baseball that I was able to take in by just sitting and watching. Now, remember, I had Bill Snyder as my offensive coordinator, one of the great coaches, never mind offensive minds in the history of college football. There was a funny story I always tell back in the old days where you had the projector and you had to press the button on the projector to rewind. And Peter Marciano was one of our teammates, Brockton, Massachusetts guy. He was the nephew of Rocky Marciano. So he was hard-nosed, Italian, whatever you would expect Rocky Marciano's nephew to look like and be like, that's exactly what Peter was. And he sat there and he took a piece of paper out and he put a check mark on the paper every time Coach Snyder rewound a play. And he rewound it 236 times, one play. And all he did was talk to the screen and he just pressed it. And he was talking to Chuck Hartley, Matt Rogers, and Tom Polsky, Jimmy Hartley, and then all of us receivers were back there. He never looked back at us. He never turned his head. He just talked to the screen. And all he said was, okay, look at this. Look where the tackle is. He's lined up right there. When he's lined up right there, this is what he has a tendency of doing. And then the safety, that safety's at 8 yards, while the other safety's at 9 yards. When that safety's at 8 yards, that's where he's going to roll up towards the line of scrimmage. So that's going to be cover 3. If he's at 9 yards and equal with the other safety, that's going to be cover 2. And the corner, when he's looking at like all these details and he's just pressing the rewind button, and I'm sitting there like I'm watching some incredible movie, and I'm like, wow, this is all true. This is all real. And I'm absorbing all of this information so that when my redshirt year was over and it was time for me to start competing to play and start, I saw the game and I saw the field like in a different way. If you were to ever look back at films from 89 to 92, there were times where I was moving and adjusting my stance and adjusting my position before the quarterback even audible, because I already knew what they wanted. Like I already knew based on as soon as we broke the huddle, I break the huddle, I scanned the whole defense. I'm like, oh, this is what they're going to do. Now I got to adjust my alignment because Matt Rogers or Jimmy Hartley, they're about to tell me something. They're about to go to a check. And I'm already aware of this. The tests that we used to take, remember we used to take tests before every game. I took the quarterback test and the wide receiver test. The seeds that were planted by Coach Snyder and then cultivated by Coach Patterson, like the mental side of the game made all the other stuff, the physical side, slow down. Everything was so slow. I never felt like I was outmatched. Like even playing against the Michigans and Ohio States and playing against Washington in the Rose Bowl and Miami back when they were the U. This is just football. I never felt like I was intimidated. I never felt like I was outmatched because I always felt like mentally I was prepared. And that went back to how Coach Snyder parted that understanding of the wisdom part of the game. And that actually helped me in the NFL. Part of the reason why I was able to play 6 years in the NFL is because I knew every position. And so I could be a sub for every wide receiver position. I was a captain on special teams for 4 of my 6 years. It's all because of those seeds that were planted early on when I was a runny-nosed freshman and didn't know anything about playing wide receiver because I never played it before. And I'm just sitting there like in the theater, like watching this great movie every single day with Coach Snyder and Coach Patterson after that, going through all the intricacies of this position in this game called football. And I'm like, wow, it's opening my horizons and broadening my horizons. The game was easy. Once we got through the meetings and I got to see everything, like, okay, let's go line up. Because like whoever's out there, they're not going to be able to contain me. Like I already know what they're going to do. They don't even know that I know what they're going to do. So that's what made it really cool, really fun, and really special.
Did Coach Snyder leave before your freshman year?
Right after I got 1 year under him, and then he left. And then Sean Snyder was my classmate, and then he wound up punting for 1 year, and then he left. So he didn't leave right away with Coach Snyder to go to K-State, but I did get
Okay.
Coach Snyder for my first full year, my freshman year when I was redshirted. I walked into a great situation, which I didn't even realize when they recruited me. When they recruited me and I came in as a true freshman, there were 8
Wow.
senior receivers. So all I had to do was redshirt. And when I went into the spring after that first year, I was number 2 on the depth chart. Just by elimination of the guys that graduated, I was already near the top of the depth chart. So I didn't really have to climb very high in regards to garner play time my freshman year. I think I had the record for the most catches as a freshman for probably 20 years until I don't know who broke it, but I had 40 something catches as a freshman. It was all because of the exodus of 8 guys that graduated as seniors before I was able to take the field.
So your redshirt year was with Snyder, and then your freshman season, that was with Patterson. Okay, so you had Coach Patterson,
Coach Patterson.
calm plays
Yep.
the whole thing. Was that a big transition? Because there was a whole exodus of coaches during your time, right?
Yeah.
Coach Ferentz left, Snyder, Bernie Wyatt left. It's a lot of
Coach Mack.
turnover. Coach Mack,
McCartney
yeah.
left.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot of turnover back then. And I will say this, there were definitely similarities from Coach Patterson and Coach Snyder. I feel like Coach Snyder was definitely more, I wouldn't say cutthroat, but he was definitely more concise in this is how you do it, or somebody else will jump in. And if you look over the course of his career when he was the offensive coordinator, he always had a rotation of guys. Even when Quinn Early was there, and Quinn Early was obviously a first round pick, he was one of the great receivers in Hawkeye history. They had Robert Smith, they had Bill Happel, they had other guys that were there that were part of the offense. And that's because Coach Snyder had that rotation. When Coach Patterson took over, it was me, John Falloon, Mike Saunders had 1 year in there, and then once Jazz and those guys came in, it was just a core of guys. So I feel like the difference between them is that Coach Snyder was so much of you stay within the lines. This is how I want you to do it. This is how you do it. And Coach Patterson gave us a little bit of leeway, a little bit of flexibility. But I've had a great relationship with Coach Patterson. I consider him one of the great mentors in my life. I still do college football with him, broadcasting. We've done the Missouri Valley Football Conference, broadcasting games. He was at Western Illinois for decades. It was a special experience, but definitely a different approach between those two, but both of them equally as important in my life.
Were you really integrated in special teams in college as well then? Or
No,
just more receiver?
no, I never punt returned in my life. I kick returned, and when I got to the NFL, I was on practice squad for 10 games my rookie year, and one of the receivers got hurt, and Marty Schottenheimer came up to me and said, "Hey, we need a punt returner. Can you punt return?" I was like, "Yeah." Never did it in my life. Of course, I'm not gonna say no. Like, yeah, I can do it.
That's
And
looking at a job. Can you do this? Yes.
yeah, of course. And one of the reasons why I was successful at punt return is because I was a center fielder in baseball and I knew how to track a ball. So I knew how to read the ball and how when the ball turns over, it's going to go further. When it drops, when the ball's spinning this way, it's going to drop. When it's spinning a little bit this way, it's going to go further. One other technique that I had is that when the ball was punted, I would turn to the side. So you turn to the side, and that's an outfielder trick because if you look at outfielders, when the balls hit to the outfield, if you turn to the side, you can see the depth better. Even ground balls on the infield, shortstops, they turn to the side so that they can see the bounce better as opposed to the ball coming straight at you. So those were 2 quick techniques that at the NFL level I was able to pick up on. I was like, oh, I can track this football. I know I can catch it. It's just a matter of tracking it. I got birthed into the NFL on Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills and punt returning on Monday Night Football. That was the first game I ever played in the NFL, and that's how it started with special teams. And I caught the bug, and I was one of the knuckleheads on kickoff coverage. I was an R3 or L3, so I was running through the wedge. I was a personal protector on punt coverage. I was a kickoff returner, or I was a blocker or halfback on kickoff returns. I was a bracket on punt returns. So I was on all four phases of the special teams at the NFL, but I hadn't played pretty much any of those up until I got to the NFL.
That first punt return must have been pretty crazy, like just the nerves and your first NFL game too.
As soon as the ball was snapped, I fair caught it. It didn't matter how far it was going. I fair caught. I was like, I don't know if I can return this, but I definitely am going to catch this first. Let me woosah. Let me relax. I said, I'm going to catch this punt, and then maybe next time I'll try to return it. You look back at that film, I'm sure that fair catch came out before the ball even was punted. I was like, I'm not even going to roll the dice here. I'm just going to make sure I catch it before I even try to do anything else.
Smart move, yeah.
Get your priorities in order first. That's
For real.
Don't get fired on that first play, yeah.
I know, right? For real.
It is funny. I had a friend of mine, Steve, who was one day when I was practicing punting, he said, "Oh, come on, I'll come out and catch some for you." I laughed. I was like, "Good luck," because some of the balls can go back and forth like 5 or 6 feet coming down and all that. There was a returner when I was like at the practice squad with the Jets. I think Leon Johnson was his name, and he was a good enough athlete where he could do that and he would catch it like 2 inches off the ground. And I was like, that's a special talent that you can track that ball and then be able to just be goofing around basically and catch it with his fingertips right off the ground. Like,
yeah, there's so many different drills. It's cool from a punt return perspective that I didn't experience at Iowa, but in the pros, they're just trying to create different ways. So we would lay face down and the ball would punt. We would hear the thump, and we'd have to get up and try to track the ball. We'd have to turn around and face the coach behind us. We'd hear the thump, and then he'd tell us to turn around, and we'd have to go get the ball. There were times where we would have to keep our eyes closed, or he'd make us spin 360 or 720 and then go get the ball. And obviously, none of that applies to what you would do in the game. But what it does do is get you out of your comfort zone and forces you to emulate a little bit of turmoil or turbulence in doing your job. So jumping up and spinning around 360 and then finding the ball and catching it and securing it almost made it easier that when you're in the game and it's Monday Night Football, that you have to catch it in traffic, that you're not going to be fazed by all the bodies flying around you because you emulated being a little bit uncomfortable. So like there's creative ways to be able to be a professional at your craft. And the Chiefs, we used to pay a lot of attention to that, and I'm so grateful for it.
and was that Coach Stock that was pushing those things? Was that his name, I think?
Yes. So Coach Stock came after Kurt Schottenheimer. So Kurt Schottenheimer, who was Marty's brother, was the special teams coach when I was a rookie. I want to say my rookie and my second year. And then Coach Stock came after that. Special teams coaches, as you guys know, they're unique animals as well. They're right below the chart of Iowa wrestlers and special teams coaches because you got to be a little twisted to be a special teams coach, especially at the NFL levels. We had some special experiences. There's a lot of expletives and all that stuff that come out of coaches' mouths when you're trying to get everybody riled up. But it's unique, and I talk about this on the Chiefs broadcast all the time. Think about it, like at the NFL level, everybody that's played special teams probably has never played it before, in part because they were probably superstars on offense or defense. So in college, they probably didn't play it. In high school, they definitely didn't play it because they were the number one linebackers, number one defensive backs, number one receivers, or other tight ends, etc. So when you get to the NFL and you've gotten to the NFL because you're good at those positions, now you have to retrain your mind that, okay, I'm not going to beat out Derek Thomas. I'm not going to beat out Neil Smith. I'm not going to beat out these superstars on offense and defense, but I got to be able to make plays on special teams. And it's a different dynamic that I don't think people recognize as tough as that it really is.
The coach I had was a first-year NFL coach, but he was the defensive coordinator in Arizona. So he had like the Desert Swarm defense. And so when he went to the Giants, he got put in a special teams coach. And he would always joke, like we'd see some crazy person doing something or doing some weird exercises. And he'd always be like, there's a former special teams coach over there. This is going to drive someone crazy and they're going to go off and lose their mind. And so he'd point out strange people doing stuff. And it's like, oh, yeah, he probably was special teams coach too at one time.
Absolutely. Different breed.
You also said in high school you played quarterback, and then you said you knew all the quarterback quiz questions at Iowa. Did they ever try to play you at quarterback? I know they were practicing some like wide receiver throws or throwbacks, but
I did all those.
Yeah.
I did all those at Iowa, and I actually did them with the Chiefs too. So in Kansas City, I was the emergency quarterback because obviously, it could suit up 46 men. So you had the first string and second string quarterback, and I was the emergency quarterback. I think I was 4 or 5 in my career in the NFL in reverse passes or double passes as a wide receiver. In Iowa, I threw a couple, but I did all those trick plays, and I could throw the ball 60 plus yards, basically because baseball. I couldn't throw it anywhere close now, but yeah, I could throw the ball pretty far and pretty accurately back then, being a former quarterback.
I think that just shows like you've just found a spot to be as most valuable as possible, like special teams, backup quarterback, knowing all the plays, all the receiver positions. I think that's a model for people to like, you want to get on a team and stick on a team, like you make yourself as valuable as possible. Yeah.
I am a testament to that. I remember stretching during practice in like my 5th year in the NFL. And Marty Schottenheimer used to walk around while we were stretching before practice. And he's like, Danan, I've been trying to cut you for years. And I'm like, I'm going to make it the toughest decision you ever have to make. Whatever you need done, I can do. Special teams, you want me to run through a wedge? Good. You want me to catch punch? You want me to kick off return? You want me to throw reverse passes? You want me to play the E, the X, the Z, the Y? I'm going to be prepared for it. So it's going to be the toughest decision you ever have to make. And we had a good laugh about it, but that's real. That's how I felt. I would hate to have been a person who had a shortened career or didn't maximize his opportunities because he didn't know. There's so many uncontrollables that we have in the game. I felt like everything that I could control, I controlled. And then if it didn't work out, so be it. Coming upon my 7th year, I was done with Kansas City. I signed as a free agent with the New Orleans Saints. I went down there. Mike Ditka was the coach. That was the year in 1999 that they traded all the draft picks and signed Ricky Williams. I'm there during the off season. I'm there during training camp. I'm there during the preseason, and they voted me a captain. I was a team captain. So I'm like, okay, cool. I moved my family down there. My kids enroll in school. And I'm like, okay. And they cut me the next week. My career's over. I'm sad. We have to move back up to Kansas City. Happy that my house didn't sell so we can move right back into our house and move forward and everything like that. But in back of my mind, part of the consolation was like I did everything I could. I did enough that they felt that I was warranted as a captain. And then for whatever reason, business-wise or whatever, they decided to cut me. I said, that shows more about their dysfunction than it shows about me. And lo and behold, you saw the fruition. Until Drew Brees got there, they were very dysfunctional. So that's one of those deals where I can look back and, yeah, I thought maybe I could play a few more years, but the business side, the details and all that stuff just didn't work out for me. But I know I controlled everything I could control, and I could sleep well with that.
So you got drafted 93, you go to Kansas City, but you're still in the Brewers farm system. Talk us through that part with the second year of minor leagues and NFL draft and all that.
I get drafted in 92, June draft. I go right to rookie ball. I play that summer. I tell them that I'm going back to the University of Iowa to play football my senior year. As soon as July 31st comes, I jump on a plane. I don't even think I told them. I just assumed that they remembered. I don't even think I announced it. I was in Helena, Montana, playing rookie baseball, and like July 31st came. I was like, all right, see you guys. I'm going back to Iowa. It's time for me to go play football. I left. I played football my senior year. As soon as the season was over, I went to the East West Shrine and the Hula Bowl, and then I went to play baseball. And I broke my foot at the East West Shrine game. So now I'm trying to get prepared for the combines, and I can't run because I got a broken foot. But lo and behold, I had to get surgery, and I got surgery literally 4 days before the football draft. And back then, obviously, there wasn't any cell phones or anything like that. So the doctors had to hurry up and fax my results of my surgery to all 30 teams. There was only 30 teams back then. All 30 teams the day before the draft. And I was supposed to be a second round draft pick, and I wound up being a seventh round pick because of playing professional baseball and having a broken foot. I never got to run my 40. I never got to do any of the combine stuff. I understand now that I dropped that significantly because of the unknown. I went to mini camp, and then I went back to baseball. And I was playing baseball all the way up until training camp of football. And then as soon as training camp started, I went to the Chiefs, went to training camp. And the way the MLB is set up is that if they draft you and you sign, they have your rights for 6 years. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go try football. And if I fail, I can always go back to baseball. But if I never try it, I'm going to have regrets about never giving it a shot. So I went to training camp. I was on crutches still, and I wound up making the team on practice squad. And then I never looked back for baseball. And then 6 years later, like I have an opportunity once my football career is over. I'm like, I could go back to baseball and try it, but my body was beat up. I was married. I had 4 of my 5 kids at the time. I was like, I'm not going back to minor league baseball. I'm 28 years old. That day has passed. So I wind up giving up my baseball career right then. But they still have my rights for the Milwaukee Brewers if I would have opted to go back.
And how big were you when you got drafted? Were you 2.25? Were you that big?
I want to say I played my entire football career between 210 and 219. I think the heaviest I ever got was 219. And actually, when I was 219, I was like 4% body fat. I was in the best shape of my career, and that was the end of my career at 219, my 7th year in the league. I played at Iowa like 205-ish. And then when I got to the NFL, I was like 212 to 217-ish for most of that career. Back then, that was big for a receiver. Not necessarily tall, but big. And then obviously with the special teams aspect and the toughness that I brought with that, that was the added bonus.
Yeah, that's why I was asking the question. The Iowa receivers, obviously, you were good size for there. Maybe was at the start of the larger receiver kind of period too in the NFL, right?
Yeah, I'd say there was some guys that were taller. I don't think like the Jerry Rices were my size, but you had them scattered around a little bit. There was nobody bigger than me on the Chiefs at that time. I think I was the biggest receiver. Yeah, maybe it might have been the opening of the door, that size receiver. And then you got to the point of guys like fast forward years later of the Andre Johnsons and the Randy Mosses and all those guys that were thicker receivers. I felt comfortable at 205. In high school, I was 195. It wasn't trying to put weight on or trying to get thicker. It was just a natural progression. You go from being in New Jersey and Bayonne High School eating powdered donuts every day as your pregame meal in McDonald's, and you get some Iowa pork chop and some good steaks at Iowa and pasta. That'll put some good weight on you. And then the strength and conditioning program helped as well. But I would say this, one of the benefits of playing baseball was that I didn't get too bulky by playing football all year round and having the weight program. Like I had to balance the flexibility and being slim to play center field with still being strong enough to play wide receiver. So it never allowed me to get bulky up top or lose a lot of my flexibility and speed.
How did you keep up like doing workouts and weight training at all? Did the baseball team have facilities? You're close at Iowa, but when you get on the Brewers, they didn't have a real great facility, I can't imagine. You just did
No,
your
they
own
didn't. And
training.
yeah, I had to do two-a-days. When I was in minor league baseball, I was in Helena, Montana. Like we play at night. So we play at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And so we'd have to be at the field by 4 o'clock. I would actually go to the field at 10 a.m. or even earlier. I would run the poles, I would run routes in the outfield, I would do all my football workouts, and then I would leave, go take a nap, go have dinner or whatever, or pregame meals, and then come back. So literally, I woke up a football player doing all the football player stuff. Then I went home. I went back to my apartment, and I came back as a baseball player that same night. So I had to do that, and that took a lot of discipline. Obviously, going back to Iowa and playing my senior year. After the junior year, where we went 10-1-1, we went to the Holiday Bowl. We tied at the Holiday Bowl. I was all Big Ten. I didn't want to go back and feel like I was less of the player. Everybody else was getting better. Mike Devlin, Beefaroni, Lou Montgomery, all these guys that were coming back that were seniors with me. I didn't want them to feel like I had shortchanged them and our senior year. You guys have been there where your senior year is so special because you've been around these same guys. We all redshirted together. Nobody started, nobody played as a freshman. Like we all went through the dog days of being on scout team and grinding through and then having the success we had. So I didn't want to feel like I was shortchanging them by coming in just in baseball shape. So I really made a concerted effort during that summer that I was going to put my body through a lot of craziness to make sure that I was still in shape to play Big Ten football when the time came. And that senior year was special for me because we opened up at the Kickoff Classic in New Jersey. That experience still brings chills to me, goosebumps to me, because that was our opportunity to go back to New Jersey. So for Mike Devlin, for Mike Ferroni, for myself, Larry Blue, Harold Jasper, Hyzak, all these guys that were East Coast guys, Slutsker, all those guys. This is the only time we'll get back east to play. And for me, my parents came to 3 games of my entire career before my senior year. Like they might have saw me play in person 3 times. I grew up 20 minutes from Giant Stadium, so I had 200 plus people at the game. So when Coach Fry, he came to us, he came to me, Devil, Beef, and Larry, and he said, "Hey guys, we got an opportunity to go to the Kickoff Classic." Now he already made his decision. He already knew he was going to take the bid, and we were going to play. But he made it seem like he was coming to us to ask us if we wanted to do it, and we were like, "Heck yeah, we want to play home. We want to go back home and play at Giant Stadium." So he took the bid. We went there. We were playing NC State, and I remember it was the most emotional game of my life. Like I was so shook up. My hometown of Bayonne is really, really close to my heart. This was my time to show them what they produce. In my mind, it was like these 200 fans and whoever else is here that I don't know, and all my family that's nearby. I got to show them I'm a product of my environment. I'm a product of a community raising me. And now I get a chance on Giant Stadium to show them what they produce. So I was shook. I was shaking. I was crying. This is before the game, like in the locker room. I couldn't get myself together. And then they announced us. And Coach Fry, we're going to announce the offense. And Danan, you're going to be the last one to come out. And they announced us individually. I was outside of myself. It was like a subhuman like experience. I remember standing in my locker, shaking and crying, feeling like a caged animal before the game. Let me out. We got to go. Hurry up. Let's get this going real quick. And I had 2 touchdowns in the game. We wind up losing, but it was one of the most special experiences of my life because, like I said, I never had family come out to Iowa and see me when all the other guys, Scott Davises and everybody else, and Lou Montgomery growing up in Waterloo had family every single week. I'm just there. And then you got Larry and Jazz and all of us. We're all together. We don't have the family. Now we get to go back and have that experience. And even though we lost the game, it was one of the most special experiences of my life to be able to showcase to my people, this is what you produced. When Danan left in 1988, you might have thought of him one way, but now he's back in 92, and I got something to show for you. And I had 8 catches and 2 touchdowns along the very long list of excellent experiences with the University of Iowa. That's one of them.
I can see that could drive your training over the summer and the baseball.
Oh yeah,
because you're like, I got to shell out for that first game.
yes,
That's
sir.
awesome.
Yes.
Back to the donuts. I do have a funny story about that. I don't think I've ever ruined my dinner in my entire life, maybe once. So after practice, we would go to the grocery store between practice and home. We'd stop and get a quart of milk, and we would get like a 12-pack of Entenmann's donuts. Polish those off by the time we were like a mile down the road, go home and eat a full meal and probably not even be full after that. So it's funny reminded me of that. I'm sure my mom will be really disappointed now that she hears those stories. And that was every night.
You had the quarter of milk with the Entenmann's donuts. Mine was the powdered donut with a quarter of orange juice. There you go.
Oh, that's amazing.
That sounds gross.
Yeah, that's a little powder plus the orange. Yeah, it might be. Tell us about the Rose Bowl and the Holiday Bowls and some of those years with the bowl games. What memories do you have of those?
The Rose Bowl was obviously an incredible experience, but it was an interesting experience because we had a huge snowstorm at Iowa and the bubble collapsed. So we actually had to go out to Newport Beach, California, a week earlier than we would have had to go. So we actually spent 2 weeks at the Rose Bowl. They twisted our arm and made us go. We really didn't want to go. Yeah, we had to go. So we had a lot of free time on our hands. It was a great experience, a great time. The game didn't unfold like we would have liked. Washington was a beast. I think they had like 10 drafted players on their defense, and Mark Brunell and Billy Joe Tolliver were the quarterbacks, and like they were just incredible. And we wound up losing the game, but that experience was special. That for me was my first experience as a bowl as playing, because my true freshman year we played in the Peach Bowl, but I was redshirted. So all I did was get to go. I didn't get to play. So playing in the Rose Bowl that year was really special. And then the next year, I think because we lost Nick Bell, we lost Tony Stewart, Jim Johnson, and some other guys that were all Big Ten, we wound up losing them. I don't think people expected us to be as good my junior year, which was 91. That was the year that we went 10-1. The only loss we had was Michigan. We should have gone to a bigger bowl game, but the Big Ten had signed a contract with the Holiday Bowl that the Holiday Bowl was going to get the number 2 team in the Big Ten regardless. And because Michigan had went undefeated and we lost to them, we were number 2, they were number 1. So we had to go to the Holiday Bowl, and we had to face BYU, which had the Heisman Trophy winner, Ty Detmer, at quarterback. And to this day, we still own the record for the highest win percentage in Iowa Hawkeye history. We were 10-1, and we tied that bowl game. I think we tied it 13-13 or something like that.
13-13, yeah.
And that was a great experience. Leroy Smith was parade All-American, Playboy All-American, and he blew his knee out in the first quarter of that game. Otherwise, I think that game would have changed dramatically. We had Mike Wells on the defensive side. Carlos James came up with a big interception to close the game when BYU was going in to score the winning touchdown. So it was an epic game. It is actually an answer to a trivia question. What's the last tie in a college bowl game in history? It's Iowa versus BYU in 1991.
Wow.
We played against Desmond Howard that year, who was the Heisman Trophy winner. We played against Ty Detmer, who was the Heisman Trophy winner. The next year, my senior year, we played against Miami, Gino Torretta, who had the Heisman Trophy. There wasn't any cupcakes on our schedules back then, and yet we were able to step up and 10-1 with that record, with that kind of schedule, and then tying a bowl game, and then still 34 years later, still having the highest winning percentage in Iowa Hawkeye history on the 91 team. Matt Rogers, my quarterback, he was my roommate on the road. So I had a great relationship. If there's any message for any upcoming wide receivers that are listening or watching this podcast, get your quarterback as your roommate. Like something simple like that. Have your quarterback as your roommate. That might mesh you a little bit better. And Matt and I are still close friends to this day. But yeah, we had some special times and great memories. But the Rose Bowl, then to go to the Holiday Bowl was super special. And then it was a huge drop that we lost to Minnesota my senior year. And we got knocked out of bowl contention on the last game of the season at Minnesota. So we wind up being 5-6 instead of 6-5, and we didn't go to a bowl game.
I think we were supposed to go to the Copper Bowl.
We were a better football team. We just
Yeah.
never played well up in the dome. Minnesota, I think, beat us both times throughout my career up in the dome. That was debilitating loss for me and for the seniors. I remember Jimmy Hartley got hurt. Paul Burmeister came in as a quarterback and did a solid job, but Jimmy had hurt his shoulder, and he would have been scheduled to play and start in a bowl game had we gotten to a bowl game. So I know that was tough for him because at that point, you don't really know when your career is over until it's over. And the fact that we weren't able to get that win so that we could have had one more opportunity to play together. It's not a knock to any of those other guys, but when Jimmy was my quarterback, I think I had 8 catches, 9 catches. I was in the Heisman talk in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season because me and Jimmy had a relationship. He trusted me, and we were able to make some big plays. And when he went down, it kind of dropped us. And then I got hurt, bounced back from my injury, but we just couldn't get over the hump.
I think the Big Ten at that point too, there was really no weeks off. Either the lower rung of the Big Ten was still a dogfight and physical and all that you had to show up every week and play. And it wasn't really just anything that you could mail in. Minnesota always played tough, and I guess everybody always played tough,
Yeah.
right? It was kind of a week-to-week thing.
Yeah, and the year before in 91, we played them in the Snow Angel game. A lot of people still always talk to me about me making the Snow Angel when I scored a touchdown against Minnesota at Kinnick Stadium in 1991. They probably didn't like that very much, but they were able to get some retribution the next year. But a lot of great experiences, a lot of fun memories, a lot of great things that we remember, some things that we don't remember in totality, that when we get together, we're able to kind of remind each other of. But yeah, you're right. The Big Ten was a beast back then, and there were no free passes, there were no free lunches. Each week you had to show up. I think we wind up my senior year, one of the games that surprised us and pushed us to that 5-6 record. I think we lost Purdue at home, which was a surprise because although Purdue wasn't a pushover, we were definitely a better football team. They wind up surprising us and beating us at home, and that kind of put us behind the 8 ball.
Besides the Snow Angel game, any other games that stick out in your mind that you think about or remember fondly, or maybe not so fondly?
Oh man, I think I only had 1, maybe 2 drops in my entire career. And one of them was against Northwestern my senior year on senior day. We wound up winning that game, but that touchdown, it was a tough catch, but it's still a catch. Like it touched my hands, it should be caught. And I wind up having tied the touchdown record, and that would have made me number 1. So I was tied for number 1 because I dropped that one. I could have been 22. It would have been number 1. It wound up years later getting broken, just like most of my records. But that was something that jumps out to me because I always felt dropping the ball was like a cardinal sin. So the fact that I only had 2 drops, and I didn't realize I had 2. I thought I had 1, which that one. And then I happened to watch the Big Ten Network like a couple of months ago, and they were replaying the Ohio State game in 1990. And I dropped a pass on the sideline. I was like, what the heck? Totally blacked that one out. So the 2 drops I had in my career. But as far as games, playing the University of Miami in the first night game at Iowa was huge. When they had the Farmers versus the Felons, they had the T-shirts. Like that was cool. The Kickoff Classic is the one that jumps out to me because that one shook me. Sometimes you go into games where you tap into a side of yourself that you didn't know was there. I was intense. I was fiery. I didn't care about my opponents. I didn't care about my body, like all that stuff. And you think that you've reached your max of recklessness to play the game of football. And then something comes along like the Kickoff Classic, and you're like, I didn't know I had all this pent up emotion and intensity in me. So that was special for me because I feel like there's different times that we can look in our careers, whether it's high school, college, or pros, where you realize that this game is real to you. I remember in high school, I took over at quarterback because the previous quarterback was running the ball. He got flipped up in the air and landed on his head, almost broke his neck. And he was one of my close friends. I literally remember seeing him getting carted off and put into the ambulance. And I remember a light switch going on in my head. Oh, this is real. This is how we play this game, huh? And it took me to a whole different intensity level. And then when I got to Iowa, it felt like I got to another intensity level in playing the game and taking it serious and playing in a reckless, abandoned fashion the way I did. And then obviously getting to the NFL and making a career of it. I feel like there were just different circumstances that I can look back and wow, it was all part of the process of Danan Hughes and getting to whatever level I was able to get to and to whatever accomplishments I was able to get to. There were specific instances that I can tap back into this. Okay, that's why I'm like that. That's why I became this. That's why this is where it all started. That's where the rumblings happened. And that's really cool, especially when we get around the fire pit and I'm sitting around with Al Cross and all these guys, and we're sitting up in Coog's cabin in Wisconsin, and we're just chilling. Derby's there, and all of our buddies are there, and we're reminiscing on stuff. And you can see guys getting choked up and faces getting red and tears coming down because of how special those times were and how much of a bond it glued us together with. We never talk about the scoreboard. It's always about the experience. And I don't think we would ever remember some of the scores, but we remember the experiences. We remember the hugs. We remember the hokey pokey in the locker rooms, all that stuff that makes the memories so special.
RT said he can attest to your
Oh,
fairness as well.
I hate Ryan. Did he say he hated me?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh, I got a great story about Ryan. So how it all started. We're playing Iowa State, my senior year, 92. Ryan fumbles the ball like 3 times. I think he gets the fumble 2 of them, but then one of them gets turned over. You can ask any of the teammates that I had. I never said anything to any other player on the team at all. I never went to the quarterbacks and said, yo, I'm open. I was never that wide receiver. I was just like, hey, they have a process, the offense, they have a progression, they'll find me, whatever. But I never went to the huddle and be like, yo, Matt, yo, Jimmy, I'm open, feed me or whatever. I was never that guy. So I was never the guy that would go and scream at an offensive lineman, man, block or something like that. But Ryan, on that day, he fumbled like 3 times. And I went back to the huddle and I was like, hold on to the ball. And that was out of character with me. So we have this running joke for now 30 something years where he's like, man, I knew you was right. But in my mind, I was saying, man, I hate D Nice. I hate him, man. I hate him. I hate him for saying that, right? So now we go back and forth of hating each other. So then fast forward, he's playing for the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm playing for the Chiefs, and he's kickoff returning, and I'm running down on kickoff. So I'm talking trash as I'm running down, literally as I'm sprinting down the field. Here I come, R. Here I come. I'm coming to take you out. And I didn't realize because I always played with Ryan, I didn't realize how fast he was because we're on the same offense. So I'm running down and I'm coming down and then he turns the corner on me. And I'm like, I'm coming for you. I was like, oh, snap. Oh, I didn't know how fast. I mean, oh no, where you going? Where you going? Get over. So we had this running joke. I was like, man, I didn't know how fast you was. I started chasing you. I couldn't catch up to you. And I was like, yo, where you going? So Ryan, RT, and I have this running joke for 30 plus years of he hates me, I hate him, but it's all in love.
He went on about it for a while. It was funny to hear him retell the story as well. He was like, yeah, it's great. Give us a few of your favorite Coach Fry stories. I know everybody has a favorite moment or two from him.
Oh man.
Did anything interesting happen when he came to visit? Because he came to your house?
Yeah, he came to my house. He had the cowboy boots on. He sat on the
Yeah.
couch, had the Texas kind of twang, and he's got the one-liners and all that stuff. One of the coolest stories that I have is that years later we went to Mesquite, Nevada, and he was turning 80 years old. And me, Mike Saunders, Derby, there was probably 30, 40 guys that went out there. Tim Dwight, several guys from different generations. Devin Harberts, just off the top of my head, went out there. We were playing golf. We were going to see him. We were going to have a dinner and stuff like that, celebrate his 80th birthday. He was sitting on the 10th tee box. So we had a golf tournament. He was just going to stay at the one hole. So when you made your round, you got to the 10th tee box, you would see him. And I'm thinking, he's 80 years old. Like, I haven't seen him in 20 years. And I got sunglasses on, whereas I'm definitely looking a lot different than I did back in 1992. And I got shorts and polo shirt on, sunglasses, baseball cap on, and walk up to the box. And he's like, Danan Hughes, Snow Angel, blah, blah, blah. He starts reeling off all this stuff about my whole career while I was playing. I was like, 80 years old, you haven't seen me in 20 plus years, and I don't even look the same. Like, you couldn't tell behind my glasses who I was and all that stuff, but yet he knew that. And that was so impressive to me that it wasn't somebody whispering in his ear. It was like, okay, wow, like, I know you made an impact in my life, but I obviously made an impact in yours because you remember me this far along. And for it to come to your mind so quick. And at that point, he had some debilitating type of performance issues or things like that. So it was special to know that regardless of all the surroundings, regardless of the time, that I know you made an impact in me, but I also made an impact in you, Coach. That the fact that you would remember me to that fashion was really cool. The story I said about the Kickoff Classic, that still stands in my mind because it wasn't something that we went to him, Devil and I, or Beef and I, like he came to us. And I was actually playing baseball. So he's, Dana, we need to see you over at the complex. We're going to have a meeting. And I'm like in the middle of a baseball season. He's, hey, this is what we're going to do. We want to see if you want to do it. And I was like, yeah, of course. He had the innate ability to know how to connect, whether it was sitting in my living room with my parents in New Jersey with a kid that's never been on an airplane, never been out of the state of New Jersey, outside of New York, and to give us all a comfort that your prized possession of a son is going to be in good hands, to convince them of that, to convince me that he's going to have the integrity to allow me to play baseball and football, to deliver on all his promises, to then allow me to be a starter for 4 years and to have the relationships I have. It's tough for me to put into words the impact of my life and the friendships that I have. We talk about this every single year. Like we're Cooge and everybody. We sit around the pits and we talk about all this and we're brought to tears because we know now as 54, 55-year-olds how real it was, how everything came into place and how all the puzzle pieces fit because of one man, Coach Fry. I will forever be indebted from a lifelong standpoint to Coach Fry and what his impact was in my life than just football for 4 years.
I think a lot of people would agree. It's hard to put into words, just like this experience and then to look back and reflect how cool it was. You don't realize it at the time.
I do remember I hurt my ankle my senior year against Michigan, and it hampered me the rest of my senior year. And I think it actually contributed to me breaking my foot because it was the same foot. I hurt my ankle. So he went to the meeting. Danan's got a hitch in his giddy up. That was his term, a hitch in my giddy up because my foot was hurt. Great experiences, no regrets in anything that involves being a Hawkeye.
Let's talk about all the different legends that you played with at Kansas City. I think you were fortunate to play with some really great talent in that regards.
At the time, you don't realize the greatness that you're playing with or you're starting your career with, but then you're able to look back even at the end of my career and then obviously years after, you're like, wow, like I played with a roster of Hall of Famers. Like I came into the league, I was drafted with Will Shields, who's a Hall of Famer, offensive lineman from Nebraska. I actually knew Will in college because I used to go up to Nebraska because my cousin was the safety there. So I'd drive the 4 hours to Lincoln and hang out with them every once in a while. And so I knew Will from there, and then we got drafted together. He's a Hall of Famer. I played with Tony Gonzalez, who was a Hall of Famer. Not many people realize that Ronnie Lott, his last stint in the NFL was with the Kansas City Chiefs. And he's a Hall of Famer. Marcus Allen, Joe Montana. So many great players that I got to play with in Kansas City. Great teams. I made it to the AFC Championship my rookie year. Returned punts in that game against the Buffalo Bills. I caught a couple of passes in that game as well. We were 13-3 2 other years, #1 seeds. I couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs. So a lot of special teams, a lot of special players in the NFL in my 6 years. And then being able to stay here in Kansas City and go into the broadcasting side as well afterwards has been an amazing experience for me as well. But going back to my playing days, it was just fun, man. It was just a great experience, a great time in Chiefs history. The 90s, you can talk to people around the Chiefs kingdom. Like the 90s were the heyday. That's when it really all became real. When Arrowhead was rocking and Monday Night Football and Sunday night and Thursday night football here. Derek Thomas with his exploits wreaking havoc on opposing quarterbacks and the John Elway and Joe Montana Monday Night Miracle in 1994, where we were able to beat them up in Mile High Stadium. There's just so many different levels to it. It's just a really cool experience. And for a guy like me that was a blue collar player, wasn't necessarily the #2, #1, #3 receiver, but I figured out a way to play and still have an impact on the team and still be able to contribute to the wins and the success of the team. And then to be able to carry that for 30 plus years later in the media world and broadcasting, God has definitely his hand on it. There's nothing that I feel like I did, but I know that there was definitely a plan and that it was definitely a blessing to be able to come basically 4.5 hours southwest of Iowa City and still have the same kind of experiences that I experienced at Iowa.
The fan bases are both relatively similar too, right? Love their team, their like small market feel and all that. The one thing I thought was cool about the Chiefs was at the end of the Star Spangled Banner, when they home with the Brave, the whole stadium chants the Chiefs, which I thought that was pretty cool. It was interesting when you talk about Derek Thomas, just the level of athleticism that he was above everyone else, right? You see everyone, they're all just ridiculous athletes, and you see him, then he's just stands out that much more than everyone else, which I thought was crazy. The couple of times I saw him when I was in camp there.
Yeah, just freakish athletes. That's what you don't realize is that obviously we played against top shelf opponents in the Big Ten, and we had a lot of great athletes on our roster throughout the course of my time at Iowa. But then when you get to the NFL, you realize everybody's a freak. It's not just a few guys, it's like everybody. And Derek Thomas and Dale Carter and Neil Smith and James Hasty. And I can go on and on about guys like that I was in awe of every single day. Wide receivers that you never heard of, like J.J. Burden and Willie Davis and other guys, how they're able to have success at the NFL level. And it's guys you never heard of. They weren't everyday players or everyday guys from a big time college programs, but yet they're able to flourish at the NFL level. And being able to play with them and play against Deion Sanders and playing against all kind of superstar, the Rod Woodsons and Charles Woodsons and all these guys. And what's cool about my experience is seeing some of the greats when they first came into the league, like the Charles Woodsons and the Randy Mosses, and you're playing against them and you're like, oh, he's special. And then you realize, oh, he's more than just special. These guys are like bona fide Hall of Famers, top 5 at their positions. And so that experience, like in Kansas City, it was a job. We all got families, we all got responsibilities different than the college experience, but yet it's definitely as special. I still have relationships. I'm the president of the NFL alumni. I'm the president of the Chiefs alumni, which is called the Chiefs Ambassadors here. I'm very involved with the NFLPA. So even though my playing days had been over, I still was able to stay connected with a lot of that brotherhood from the NFL and my former teammates here in Kansas City as well. So it's been a great experience, man. It's been awesome. And to be able to say you caught touchdown passes from Joe Montana and played with Rich Gannon and been in part of playoff games and had key catches and punt returns and all kind of experiences here in Kansas City. I think I'm like third in the record books in special teams tackles. I think up until the last Super Bowl or 2 Super Bowls ago, I had the record for the longest punt return in playoff history with the Chiefs. So at the time, you don't realize, you just think that you're just part of just a component. And then you look back and, oh, I'm flipping through this book as I'm preparing for the broadcast. I'm like, oh, wow, my name's there. That's pretty cool. And being able to feel that again, it's awesome. And the fact that kind of like Iowa City, where if you wore the jersey, you wore the black and gold, everybody remembers you, everybody embraces you. It's the same kind of mindset here in Kansas City, where if you ever played for Kansas City, the fans in the Chiefs Kingdom, they embrace you and love you forever. So it was a perfect storm for me to be able to go to Iowa and then come down to Kansas City and end my career here after 6 years.
We'd like to take a quick break and throw a shout out to our friend Derek Price and Club Faction and the Faction Foundation. They bring NFL caliber coaching to life's playing field. Their 4-pillar system, faith, family, fitness, and finance, transforms average performers into extraordinary leaders. They don't just coach, they elevate. Find them at thefactionfoundation.com. To go back to what you said before about Marty Schottenheimer trying to cut you for that many years at a time, it was interesting. I went to a handful of camps, so I could see guys start out playing really well, especially younger guys, right? They'd play really well, and then you could see one day they started going through the roster, and they were like 1, 2, 3, and they're like, oh shoot, I'm one out of the money. So then they tell they started playing themselves out of that. And then fast forward to a couple of years ago, I started watching some of the Hard Knocks. And then you see the coaching side of it, and you're like, yeah, this guy was playing great, but then just like something happened and he started going downhill.
Cutthroat.
So cutthroat.
Cutthroat business, man.
Yeah, Schottenheimer, I remember saying like, the business of football that we were in, he'd say that like every day. It was interesting to have that piece of going from having it being like with your buddies and fun, and it was all those things. Then it's okay, this is your job, this is a business, and you don't do this, you're getting a call on Tuesday, you're gone that next week.
You look back at Kansas City and that history during the 90s, especially when I played. I came in 93. I was a 7th round pick. Every year after that, they drafted a receiver in either the 2nd or 3rd round. Every single year. The next year, they drafted Tamar Vanover. The next year, they drafted Lake Dawson and Chris Penn in the 3rd round. Both 2 receivers in the 3rd round. The next year after that, they drafted Joe Horn. The next year after that, they drafted Kevin Lockett in the 2nd round. Every single year of my career, they literally tried to replace me with somebody, and they gave them an early draft pick. And yet, because I was a special teams guy, because I knew all the positions, I was able to survive. It wasn't just hyperbole when he said, I'm trying to cut you every year. Like, he actually put stock in trying to cut me with draft picks every single year, and I was able to survive. And I always got to laugh at it, but it just goes to show you that it's not necessarily about your draft position or your prowess as a specific receiver, but it's the more you can do. Because I was on special teams, because I was a captain, because I knew all the wide receiver positions, because I was an emergency quarterback, all of those components made it tougher for him to make the obvious decision of cutting me for their 3rd-round pick or their 2nd-round pick to play more. That would have been easy. That would have been the business side, but I give him a lot of credit because he also had the football side. Maybe I was the 44th, 45th man on the 46-man roster that was activated, but he felt like that component was needed. After I was activated in my rookie year, there was one time in my career that I was deactivated. I had suffered a hamstring the game before, and I didn't practice on Monday. We had off on Tuesday. I didn't practice on Wednesday, but I practiced Thursday and Friday. And then we were playing the Green Bay Packers at home. Brett Favre was the quarterback. And back then, you didn't know that you were deactivated. You came to the game, you went through your pregame routine and got taped up and all that stuff. And then the coach literally would come around to the locker room. You'd sit in your locker room with your Walkman headset on, and they would tap on you on your shoulder and say, "Hey, Danan, you're down today." That's literally how you were announced 50 minutes, 60 minutes before the game. They tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you're deactivated."
Wow.
And I was a captain. I was looking around. Are you joking? Like somebody's joking with me? Is this like a prank? And they're like, "No, you're down." Marty had his own locker room office in the locker room. And this could have been the end of my career. But I went to him and I was screaming at him. I was like cussing at him. And I was like, "What the F are you doing? I'm the captain. Half of these receivers wouldn't know where to line up if it wasn't for me. And I do this and I do that." And to his credit, he didn't take it as disrespect. He knew that it meant something to me to be a part of what we're doing and that I took it seriously. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that he didn't take it personal because that could have been the end of my career. But I know in conversations that we had afterwards that he knew that I was just passionate about it. And I never even came to being deactivated again the rest of my career. But I remember that interaction because this was literally 30 minutes before the game. I go in and I'm knocking on his door. "What the F are you doing? Like, how are you going to deactivate me? I'm ready to play and I'm the captain." So I feel like that was a defining moment in the respect in our relationship because he knew I wasn't coming at him like selfishness. It was more about the team and it was more about my passion to play and contribute than being disrespectful.
Would you still suit up, or did you have to get undressed and get street clothes?
No, yeah, you had to go back, cut my tape off of my ankles, go in the shower, shower up, put my street clothes on, and then go on the sideline. And I remember I had sunglasses on. It was a gray, like overcast day. Didn't need sunglasses, but I kept my sunglasses on because I knew like I was halfway crying. My eyes were red. Like I didn't want anybody to see any of that. So I was just on the sideline with sunglasses on. And then I left immediately after. We wound up winning the game, but I left after the game. And there was a component of immaturity from me because the next week I had the equipment manager put a shield over my eyes, like a shield on my helmet, so that nobody could see my eyes. Because I was feeling like I'm just going to get in my own little self, my own little world, and I'm going to go through practice and do everything. And I don't want to interact. I don't want to talk. I don't want to look people in the eyes. I don't want to look at the coaches because they piss me off. That was immature. But that was just my way of trying to do it. But whatever I said to him, whatever he saw in me, he knew that it was more than just about embarrassment of being deactivated, that it was more about contributing to the team and being a team leader. And I was never deactivated again.
That's an awkward walk of shame for sure.
Yes.
When you say that about putting the visor on, that is something I guess I haven't really ever thought about. That you don't really have a place to hide in this game, right? You don't have a place where you can have like negative emotion. You have to like kind of show strength all the time. You have to be in that mindset of aggression and that stuff. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that piece of wanting to put some distance between you and people, right? That's interesting.
There's a fine line between selfishness and confidence. There's a fine line between putting forth the persona of like, you embarrassed me. And I think it also lends itself to building up equity. Like I had built up equity throughout my career that he knew where my heart was. He knew that it wasn't about selfishness. He knew that it wasn't like, oh, I got family in town. They came here to watch me play and you deactivated. He knew that it wasn't that because I had built up equity all those years before that. So I I give him credit because I think there are times where coaches may not tap into all of that and they may just see a kid that's, oh, he's being standoffish. He's not being as connecting. He's not being as respectful. And now he's a cancer or he's not a team player. But Marty saw the big picture. And I think that's what you also see with Andy Reid here in Kansas City now. That title of a player's coach gets thrown out a lot. But talk to players and ask players what is really a player's coach. And they'll tell you what it is. It's not what the media may say it is. It's actually what the experiences of and the understandings of what a coach and a player's connection is. It's going to be different for every player. Not everybody's going to be treated the same, but the understanding has to be the same. And whether you're playing through injury, whether you are showing sacrifice, whether you are coaching up other players that are younger than you, that are taking your spot, but you don't seem hesitant. Like I was coaching up guys and I knew I was competing with them, but I was like, for the betterment of the team, like Joe Horn, you need to line up here. And Lake Dawson, you need to do this. And this is what this check means, and all this stuff like that. So I feel like the great coaches, the whole picture, they don't just see it as this individual player acting up or maybe showing signs of immaturity. Why? Asking the why. Like, why is he acting up? He's never acted like that. He's never cussed out anybody. He's never shouted about anything. And now all of a sudden he is. Instead of getting mad about the emotion, ask yourself why. Oh, it means a lot to this kid. So, like, for our success, he needs to be on the field. And I made a mistake today, but I'm not going to make that mistake again. And that's what I feel like Marty said without saying.
Obviously, you have some drive to stay disciplined and go after your dreams and stay competing at a high level in two sports. Like, how do you keep yourself motivated to do that and excel and do the little things?
There's been different phases of my life that I utilize motivating factors. When I was in college, I was very close to my grandfather growing up, and my grandfather passed away the day before we played Iowa State my redshirt freshman year. So it would have been my second start. We played Oregon the first game of the year, and then we played Iowa State the second game of the year in 1989, and he passed away the day before. For the rest of my career, I literally had conversations with him in my locker. Like I literally sat there with my headphones on and I spoke to my grandfather because we were so close. And then I took on the onus of the weight of I need to showcase for my hometown of Bayonne. And that was a motivating factor. Like I can't go out and half step. I can't go out and be less than because I'm representing my entire town and I'm representing my family. And some people will cave or crumble under that, but that was a motivating factor for me because I felt like there was always accountability. Even if they weren't watching, even if we weren't on national TV, there was somebody that was going to recognize and associate me with Bayonne, New Jersey, and Bayonne High School. And I needed to represent the Hughes family and the Johnson family in Bayonne, and I needed to represent. I would have like full on conversations with my grandfather sitting in my locker waiting for Coach Fry to say it's time to go. And then carrying that on into the NFL. And then I changed my life around and came to know Christ, the NFL career. Listening to gospel music and knowing that I was playing for a higher power and playing for my brothers next to me was a motivating factor. I was never big on pregame speeches. Coach Fry's pregame speeches were great. They went in one ear and out the other to me. And it wasn't disrespectful, but when I tell you I was already in a zone before he even started talking, I felt like a caged animal in the locker room. He used to turn the lights out and tell you to visualize yourself making a play, making a catch, making a tackle. scoring a touchdown, then visualize yourself in the locker room celebrating with your brothers. I can remember the whole spiel like it was yesterday. I can remember that. But I know back then I wasn't paying attention to it. I was already gone. I was already like, Coach, let's go. We got to get out of this locker room because I'm about to go crazy. I'm about to break something. Let me out of this cage because the other team, Michigan State, Michigan, Iowa State, they said something about my mother. They kicked my dog. They spit on my sister. They did something. I hate them. Let's go. We got to go. We got to get out of here. The motivating factor was already in my head before I got to the stadium. And the difference that for me in the NFL versus college is that I carried that motivation, I carried that anger from Friday night through the game on Saturday when I was at Iowa. Like I didn't talk to anybody the night before. I didn't like the morning of, like I wasn't gonna be the conversation. There was no ha-has and jokes. I was already in the zone. In the NFL, I learned the light switch mentality. Like when I got to the NFL, like I was in the locker room, guys were playing cards, guys were playing dominoes, shooting dice, reading the newspaper, blah blah blah. And then the strength coach would come in and he'd be like, "All right, 5 minutes," and then it was like a dark haze went over the locker room. It felt like everything went dark, and everybody that was just giggling and laughing and playing cards and reading the newspaper, it was like they all went to a dark place, and it was like a light switch. It's like the light switch was on, and then it went off, and that's something that I adopted at the NFL level because I didn't walk around with the anger all day, like prior to the game. Like I was just like, everything's good. I'm going to pick up some Wendy's before the game, or I'll pick up a McDonald's breakfast sandwich, something like that. Go in the locker room. I'm reading the Kansas City Star, reading the newspaper. You go out to warm ups, you come back, do your routine, got your music on, and then the strength coach would be like, 5 minutes. And it was like, okay, now it's time to go. Now it's go time. Now they said something about my mother. They kicked my dog. Now I got to go and show them. They're trying to hurt my teammates. They're trying to take away my joy. They're trying to make our Sunday or Monday night bad. They're trying to embarrass us on national TV. Whatever. It was like a dark haze. And then I'm not helping nobody up off the field. I knocked you down there for a reason. Like, why would I help you up? Like all that stuff was not in my whole repertoire. I'm cut blocking, crack backing, peel blocking. I'm cracking through wedges. Like all that stuff was part of the game. And then after the game, we can have a beer together. We can hang out. But during the game, like I hated you. And the light switch was what was real for me.
I'm curious how you condensed it, because I think that was one of the things that I struggle with at certain points, was it being able to just be like, all right, I need to snap in and be able to hyper focus. And obviously my role is different than yours, but I just think I struggle with that piece of not being like completely amped up, but like being able to be like, okay, boom, this is happening. And our position was a little more sit around for 40 minutes and then, okay, go. And I think that was a mental struggle, at least for me, to try to pull that.
Yeah, I feel like it was always in me. Like I go back to that high school situation where my buddy got flipped upside down and almost broke his neck. And that was the first reality check of football that I had. And that was my senior year in high school. And I was like, oh, so this is not just about me being an athlete and you throw the ball up and I intercept it, or me hand it off to my buddies who was the all-state running back. Like it's more than just us playing football. Like this is real. And then the gradual steps of getting to Iowa and being on scout team and the starting defense taking pot shots at you and cheap shots at you. And I went through 3 different face masks my freshman year on scout team because they were telling me you got to crack back on the linebackers and you got to crack back and do this and block because we got to emulate what Michigan does and you got to emulate what Michigan State does as a scout teamer. And you realize it's business, and either you're gonna fight or flight. You're gonna barbecue or mildew, like I say. You're gonna either step up or you're gonna get run over. And then carrying that into, okay, now I'm actually playing, and I got these other guys that are around me that are expecting me to do something. They are counting on me to produce and where I need to be mentally to get to that. And carrying that throughout the game was key for me. There was no way I would be able to exist in college, never mind the pros, if I was like, oh, that's my buddy over there. He's a good dude at Michigan. He's a good dude at Minnesota. We were cool or whatever. No, I hate you. I hate you for these 40, 48 minutes or whatever it was. Like, I hate you. I don't want you to help me up. Don't help me up. And I feel like the consistency of that allowed me to stay at the height of it. So, like, when you say the challenge of sitting and then having to just do a job and then go back and sitting and this and that, like, for me, I was drained by the end of the day because it was an all day effort. It was more mental than physical. I was definitely in shape and ready to do 50, 60 plays in a game. But the mental part of it and the anger that I felt like I had to tap into, assuming that you disrespected me. People throw out that term nowadays, like you respect all the. No, I don't respect all opponents. I never respected all my opponents until you gain my respect. That's a difference. You see all the politically correct cliches thrown out. Hey, we respect all of our opponents. They tell players speak to the media. No, until I see you on the field and you go against me and I go against you, and then maybe by the third, fourth quarter, you might have gained my respect. But until that point, I don't respect you just because you suited up, just because you go through your practices and I go through my practices, just because you go through and prepare like I prepare. You got to show it for these 48 minutes, for these 60 minutes in the NFL. You got to show it. And then at the end of the game, I'll shake your hand. Or maybe in the parking lot, I'll bring my cooler over and you can have a beer with me and I'll introduce you to my family or whatever else. But that's not automatic just because you suit up and I suit up. That was a mindset that I had from college and definitely into the pros, that the respect part wasn't automatic. Like, you had to earn it just like I had to earn it. And if you didn't like how I played, so be it. But you're going to respect how I play. And if I see you and you're shying away from me blocking or you're backpedaling away from me, you're not gaining my respect. You might be better than me. You might be a Pro Bowler, but you don't get my respect. That's got to be earned. Once I got into that mindset, it was the automatic mechanism that propelled me throughout my career.
Yeah, and maybe it's just a misconception on my part of thinking that people are able to flick it on and off during the game, where it's, like you said, it's a mentally draining and encapsulating thing where you're all in and you're super focused. And I guess it's probably adrenaline and all that.
But Nick, some guys can. Like, I played with guys. I'm sure if you think back, you probably played with guys that was smiling and giggling and helping guys up off the ground and patting guys on the back when they went back to their huddle, stuff like that, and then would be able to line up and be laser focused the next play and be laughing on the sideline and stuff like that. No, there's some guys that are wired like that. You see it in the NFL nowadays, like the TJ Watts and the Chris Joneses and some of the beasts that are smiling and chit chatting with the quarterback during a replay and during timeouts and this and that, and then become heat seeking missiles the next play. They could do that. I couldn't do that. The Deion Sanders and stuff like that, that's smiling and handshaking with Jerry Rice and interacting with them and this and that, and then locking them up and talking trash. I couldn't go hot and cold like that. I had to stay hot the whole time in order for me to be focused. And then I'll get to cold in the fourth quarter, at the end of the fourth quarter, and then I'm cool. But I was a captain for 4 years, so I was out at the coin toss. So I got a picture back here of me, Joe Montana, Marcus Allen being at the coin toss with Dan Marino in Miami. I remember going to the coin toss with Tim Brown playing against the Raiders, and like, he said something disparaging about my uniform, how I was wearing my uniform at the coin toss. I was, I want to kill you now. So there's no respect. I understand you're one of the best receivers ever. You're a Hall of Famer, this and that. But now I don't respect you at all. Like, now I want to kill you. So that was just my mindset. And I could always appreciate the guys that could be the hot and cold and the smiling and this and that. But I couldn't be that. That's just not how I'm wired.
You weren't a dirty player though either.
Yes, I was.
Oh, you were. Okay. I was going to say, like, how did you control that? Okay, all right.
Yes, I was. It did. Hey, Brian, I got in a fight every single game of my career. Every
Okay.
single game from Iowa through the NFL, I got in a fight in every single game. Sometimes I got a flag, sometimes I got away with it, but I got in a fight in every game.
I was thinking today of like the dichotomy of going into these situations where it's like violence, right? It's just like rage and violence and all this stuff. And then you take an hour later and then you step out into the normal world and everything's just normal
Yeah.
again. So I was kind of like, are we just really twisted in the head that we're able to compartmentalize these two? Or 1 minute I'm trying to just tear somebody's head off and maybe hurt people to some degree. And then you just
Hey,
flip it. It's, oh, I'm gonna go out and have dinner and hang out and just like that. That's wild to a certain degree.
so here's a great story. Mike Wells, all Big Ten, All American defensive lineman that played with us at the University of Iowa, went on. I think he was a second or third round pick to the Bears, played with the Detroit Lions. At Iowa, we had the first meeting of the year when you first opened up camp, and some of the players would go up to the mic and talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. Mike Wells went up there my senior year, which would have been his junior year. He was 1 year younger than me. He said, guys, this is what I love about the game of football is that it's controlled violence, that I can do whatever I want on the field and not get arrested. And then he just dropped the mic and left. So we were like, oh, like I got issues, but I know that's a little bit deeper issues. That's like serial killer issues type of thing. But that speaks to your point is that some guys like this is violence that I can do that I couldn't do in my neighborhood. I couldn't do anywhere else. and Wellesley's spoken into existence. So it's forever embedded in my head that it was controlled violence that I can't get arrested for.
You guys do not play dirty against. You
I remember that, and I thought, stay away from that dude.
Yes,
That was
exactly. Right.
I'm like, okay, note to self.
know,
Yes.
no Christmas card for him.
We can wrap up with the broadcasting. So how did that all pan out with the Chiefs?
Yeah. So it was definitely a blessing for me because when you leave the game of football, regardless of where you transition into the way of life, you still have that feeling of wanting to be a part of sports. And I was fortunate that in Kansas City, my major at Iowa was broadcasting and communications. The only reason I got into it was because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was getting interviewed a lot because I played baseball and football, and because we had the success on the baseball field and success in football. And I was like, oh, wow, maybe this broadcasting thing is cool because I'm obviously comfortable with a microphone. And so then I pursued that and got my degree in broadcasting. When I got to Kansas City, Marty Schottenheimer and Carl Peterson, who was the GM, used to really encourage us to have our own radio shows, to do interviews, to be a part of the media, etc. The final 2 years I was here in Kansas City, I actually had my own radio show. And so I was doing that radio show. It was a Monday night radio show. After the game, basically, you're talking about why you won or why you lost or what you could have done better or what you did. Get callers in. We were in a big bar or club, so you had a bunch of people there. And so that propelled me in the media world while I was still playing. So when I retired, a lot of the media outlets remembered, oh, Danan, he's comfortable with media. He had a radio show. So while I was retired, they called me in to do like to be a Chiefs analyst. And then it just took a life of its own. And I was able to propel forward. And then also the Big Ten Network opened up years later. And the local radio here in Kansas City had a connection with the Big Ten Network. And the Big Ten Network, they called them and they said, hey, you're starting this network. There's this guy here named Danan Hughes who played baseball for Iowa. You might want to have him be one of your analysts. That's literally how I got connected to the Big Ten Network to do baseball, which I've done for 15 years. for Big Ten Network and ESPN. And then 5 years ago, I got asked to be a part of the Chiefs radio broadcast. So now I broadcast the Chiefs games. I travel with the team. I got this hardware here. Let's see if y'all can see it.
Nice.
Got the Super Bowl rings there for the last 3 Chiefs Super Bowls. So that's been my second career outside of banking. I've been doing mortgage banking for 20 plus years, but I still got one foot in the locker room by doing the broadcasting for college football, college baseball, and college basketball for ESPN and the Big Ten Network. That's been cool, but it all started with, first of all, majoring in it at the University of Iowa, and then being open to the opportunities to being interviewed and doing radio shows, etc. after my career.
Didn't you cover some Iowa games?
Oh, yeah.
Have you done a couple of those?
Yes, I probably do at least 5 or 6 Iowa baseball games a year. So I got to know Rick Heller and Marty and those guys, the coaches, the Iowa baseball program, very well over the years. Rick does an amazing job with that program. He's really done an outstanding job resurrecting the program to one of the top programs in the Big Ten every single year. Consistently, I got a chance to meet and talk with Brody Breck, who is a former 2-sport guy who is an outstanding pitcher and got drafted last year. So we had some similarities, obviously, with our 2-sport and him being a wide receiver and giving up football and going to baseball. It's been really cool to stay connected, not just to the Big Ten, but to Iowa baseball over the past 15 years now, since the Big Ten Network has been in existence. So it's been fun, but I get to still get my baseball fix by being a part of that. So it's been cool.
That's great. I think we'll expect a full grading from this because we're somewhat newbies.
All right. All good, man. You guys are doing a great job, bro. I saw when Cedric was on. I saw when Rashard was on. I've seen when a few guys have been on. So you guys keep doing your thing, man. It's been awesome. It's been fun to watch.
Appreciate it. Been fun. It's been fun to do. Yeah, it's been fun to reconnect.
Beef on there as well too. So that was cool.
Yeah, Beef went for quite a while.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's great. Some of these guys we knew really well, right? Like roommates and
Yeah.
guys who were on our team, and you hear the stories and the struggles that you didn't even know yourself. So it's an eye-opening experience that way, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. The roll down memory lane. The Hawkeye Times was so special in my heart, so special in my mind. I'm so glad that I can remember it like yesterday and then still have the relationships I have, man. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is the relationships, like the memories, the touchdowns, the scores, the records, the game experience, being able to go out and play golf with John Derby and his 2 sons, and being able to participate in guys' weddings, and Mike Saunders' daughter coming down to Kansas City and going to a Chiefs game, and them knowing me like I'm an uncle type of figure. Those are the things that we would have never, ever expected to be a part of the Hawkeye experience. And let's face it, not every school has it. Not every class has it. And so that experience is so special in my mind in regards to my Hawkeye time, because I don't think I would have ever had the same type of experience and love if I had it anywhere else.
Very cool.
Appreciate it. You see all the fellas back there too, man. That was my senior year. You see Demo is on there. You got Larry. You got Sed, Bo, Willie Guy, RT. All the fellas up there, man. Fritz. A lot of cats, man. Great memories.
Fritz would be fun to get on. I want to do Fritz. Yeah, Fritz would be great to get on the show.
Oh,
He
I'm
was
sure,
so
yeah.
intimidating. Oh man, I used to be like, not gonna mess with that guy.
Oh man, good times. Great dudes.
For sure.
All right, Dana. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks a lot,
Appreciate
man.
it. It was
No
great.
problem, man.
Yeah,
Thank you
take care.
guys. God
Okay.
bless, man. All right.
Later.